You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. After a long hiatus, during which I cannot really discuss any of the matters of, I certainly was not out east. Don't believe anything you've seen on TikTok. I'm SavageMick. Hello, everybody.
Hello, I'm Scarr.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Owen.
This just might get published after one of the last episodes I was on, so that intro, probably just have to cut that. Or, black vans, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, that's got nothing to do with what we're talking about today, is it?
Yeah. I believe we are here to go beyond.
We really should practice these
Beyond
things.
what?
Beyond further than anyone has beyonded before.
Alright, so.
It'll be expensive, though. $146 million expensive.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing a topical one. Excellent. We haven't done a topical one in forever. Yeah, so the 500-pound gorilla in the RPG space, WotC, backed up by Hasbro, have turned into an 800-pound gorilla with the acquisition not so long ago of the D&D Beyond team, who were founded initially. Was it Curse handled it initially, and now it's passed into some other hands, but now it's been brought.
Fandom, I believe.
Yeah,
the people who run all those wikis,
and it's now been brought into the fold. It's been they've bought up the team, they've bought up the property, they've bought up all of the hyperlinks, I guess, to turn that almost in these days essential resource for playing D&D into an in-house entity. What on earth? And as you said, Scarr, for not a little bit of money. If someone throws $146 million around in the RPG space, it's probably worth sitting up and taking notice.
There's a few interesting wrinkles to this that, I feel like I want to go over. One of them is, just the sheer scale of the acquisition. It makes me wonder, just like, how much money is WotC... Is WotC worth $1 billion on paper? Or is this like essentially a doubling of size of WotC? But then again, there's the other point I was going to think is I thought my reading of the acquisition papers was that it wasn't WotC doing the buying, it was Hasbro. So while certainly one would assume that this has been done for the benefit of WotC, they're not the ones going to be holding the reins on this. It's going to be the mother company.
Yeah, that's fair. And as I say, there are entities, enclosing entities here. And to put it in its proper business context, they're being slotted in alongside WotC. But obviously, up until now, they've mostly been serving WotC product. That is the D&D side of things. Although I imagine with this acquisition that team will grow and they may be put on task to sort of service some of the other products that sit inside the WotC envelope. I'm thinking mostly of D&D or Magic the Gathering, which is also a game that has historically benefited from large third-party run databases, easy lookups and all that kind of stuff, card catalogs and set catalogs and deck building tools, etc. So I don't think it's a big stretch, given how well the D&D Beyond team have been able to demonstrate their ability to wrangle complicated rule sets in terms of the character sheets you see on D&D Beyond, and how they filter in so many different things from the game. Turning those attentions to something like Magic would, an app-based sort of format, something you can have there at the table during a tournament, hugely beneficial. Like, I think that perhaps makes up some of the sort of the future-looking, the fortune-telling aspect of why did they pay this kind of money for this kind of company.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons I've been running around. Our good friend of the show and webmaster, Mr. E, pointed out that apparently D&D Beyond has something like 10 million users, and thus, even though 146 million sounds like an awful lot of money, it's only like €15 per user you're potentially getting data and email addresses for. And I could, being someone who works a bit in data, I could definitely see on that kind of scale, that someone would see that as a sound investment. And it's just like you're essentially paying to get access not only to technology and software specialists, but also just to have that much data and people you can reach out to again and maybe get them interested in another product.
Does D&D Beyond have a virtual tabletop, or is it just tools?
Not yet.
It's just tools right now, I think is the safe way to put it. Like the disaster there was the 4th Ed VTT project and D&D tools, or D&D, not D&D Online, that was an MMO, but yeah, the D&D tools fiasco is one of the major reasons why for 5th Ed WotC essentially licensed out everything to second parties. There was D&D Beyond handling all the online stuff, and the process of handling the 5th Ed OGL was essentially handed to Drive Through RPG in the form of DM's Guild. So,
Shane, in a roundabout way, are you trying to say, I mean, quite controversially, that Gleemax was not the best possible name for a set of tools?
For people who didn't know, Gleemax was I thought that was like specifically sort of an attempt to expand the Magic the Gathering Gatherer card catalog thing, wasn't it?
Oh no, Gleemax was in with D&D as well.
Oh yeah, it was, didn't it?
It was absolutely in with D&D as well. And was the first time I heard it, I said, that's the worst name for a product I've ever heard.
It is an in-joke for Magic R&D. Like, that is their joke.
Oh yeah, but also it was Gleemax was the tool thing they were going to do. There was a Twitter thread about this, wasn't there? Someone was talking about this recently, that D&D 4th Ed wasn't the disaster everyone says it was.
Yeah, this is like, it sold good for a top tier RPG. It just didn't, expand 20-fold like everyone says 5th Ed did.
Yeah. Like, the way I look at this is often, like, business is a ton of smoke and mirrors at the best of times, right? So you could sell a company off for 50 million and everyone would go, that was a really smart move, getting that off their balance sheet, that was really clever, really clever. And then 3 years later, you could buy that company back for 150 million and they'll talk, oh, that was really smart, picking that up again like that, increasing their share of the marketing space and their control. Then everyone talk, oh, really smart. And you're like, they sold it for 50 million and 3 years later they just spent 150 million to get it back. How is that smart? But they'll all tell you, oh, smart play.
Well, yeah, but if it depends how it reflects in the share price, which is probably something we're not all terribly well equipped to discuss. But
as far as I can determine, just a scam. Just a series of made-up numbers run around the place,
It's not a casino at all.
We can debate capitalism, fiat currency, and stocks and shares all day, I guess. But the most pertinent question I think you asked there, Owen, is, do they have a tabletop to play this virtual tabletop game on? And no, not yet, but I'm pretty sure I can put my hand up and say, I've said this before, that's definitely the way WotC are going. And now they've acquired a key piece. Now, I don't think it'll require some stretch on everybody's part, because I don't think putting virtual tabletops out is a trivial endeavor. We've seen lots of companies enter the arena, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but none of them have the kind of war chest that D&D Beyond, Hasbro, WotC, whatever way you want to sort of enumerate the entities. Like there's a far cry between what Foundry and Roll20 are able to do and what potentially Hasbro is willing to do with this acquisition. Not to mention, I mean, they have to be looking at they're probably looking at an arena where we see adventures, the thing that used to be the bread and butter of role-playing game companies. Largely the profits from those, the revenue from those is going to small creators, third parties, and increasingly in the virtual tabletop space to what are now competitors. Roll20 does very good business in terms of catering to people who buy D&D modules that have all of the Roll20 ready assets good to go and deployable. Just game out of the box sort of thing. Now, if I'm WotC and I'm seeing my books being turned into these multimedia products essentially, and then employed on a virtual tabletop environment that I don't really have any control over, and I've now acquired most of the things I need to step into that arena. Well, the first thing I'm probably going to consider doing is start to put out my own. When you pick up the book, you can also spend an extra $10 or $15 euros and pick up the digital assets to run it on DnD Beyond tabletop. And after that, I might sort of have a word with the legal guys and see what the OGL license and things say about, well, can we maybe make this a walled garden? Do we charge other companies for access? Or do we simply shut the door and say, look, if you're in the ecosystem, you're in the ecosystem, Apple style. Otherwise, stay out.
Hard to know.
What does a PHB run you in D&D Beyond?
I think you have to basically pay €40 or $40 all over again. I'm not...
And then you pay, is it, how much a month? Is it 6 a month?
I honestly don't know.
For access to sort of, if you want to be GM level, where you can
$6 a month where you can share the books. So you got one player who's he's in for 120, say, for the books, and then he's paying $6 a month, and he's the GM for his player group. So you're looking at 60, $72 for that guy a year, plus the books he buys.
I believe it's lower than that for the GMs. I mean, we can look this up pretty quickly. I think it works at about £50 a year if you want to get the GM level, if I recall correctly.
But if they get a conversion, if they have 10 million people on the thing, and they get a conversion rate of 10%, that's a million times what 50 a year. That's 50 million a year that pay back in 3 years. And presumably that would be their goal, essentially.
As well. And they'll also finagle it. They'll transfer the loan they used to buy it to the company's books, and that's a debt they have to repay, and they get tax relief on it. A lot of shenanigans.
So a hero level subscription D&D Beyond, which gives you unlimited characters and publicly shared homebrew that you pick out of the big database they're running there, access new tools, create unlimited encounters. So there's an encounter creator they've developed now recently. That's $3 a month. And then the master one, which has all of that, plus share unlock content with other players, which is your library becomes accessible to the people in your campaigns so that they can use the perks, they can access the backgrounds, they can see the monsters. Hell, they can even go and run their own games off the back of that stuff, should they see fit. That's $6 a month. And annually, you're going to get a discount on that brings it down to $55 a year if you want to be a GM. Then plus cost books, and they regularly do bundles and discounts on books and things. I've also argued that there's probably not a future where core books really matter in this kind of ecosystem. What you want is the recurring revenue, and then selling packs of stuff, be it an adventure pack that has access to the monster scenarios, encounters, new perks, whatever. Or other digital asset packs that allow you to present yourself, your character, in a way that's pleasing to you, be that artwork or backgrounds or animated borders or spell effects or special dice, a lot of which are currently present in the D&D Beyond sort of package. That's where I think this is going. So how would I in terms of who's paying what? I've often kicked a few quid to a GM if they're shelling out for digital products now. It's so easy to Revolut or PayPal a few quid over, or in fact go. I think they've the ability to gift. I don't know if they've introduced it yet, but I believe that there is the ability to gift books on D&D Beyond now. So I can buy someone who's running a game a book, or I can buy a fellow player a book. So yeah, it's still largely a model where if you're going to be the GM and you're kind of buying into the whole ecosystem, you're probably going to spend a fair bit of money. Having done that, if you decide that that's the way for you, you're probably not going to be entertaining anyone who's at the table is going, well, can we not play Pathfinder instead? You're probably going, no, we're playing this.
It's a really good way to make sure, I'm 300 in the hole for this, we're playing D&D.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think that's part of the calculation.
A strong control method, yeah.
It also brings me to make the argument that as an £800 gorilla, which it now is, there's two industries that have to be talked about by shows like us. There's the D&D industry, which is almost a close. It's like talking about Apple. And there's everything else. There's such a gulf between the sort of investment we're seeing, the sort of tech that's being rolled out, the market share, and the mind share, if you like. I mean, we used to talk about D&D as core books and encounters, whatever. But, I mean, this has been ramping up steadily through our lifetimes. It's role-playing games now. It's online experiences. It's there's a TV show you can go and watch, which is obviously Critical Role, but it's a very sort of visible D&D front product. And the Critical Role and WotC people have been in bed for quite a long time in terms of propping each other's market share. So, and we can expect to see more.
I'm still shocked at that. I'm still shocked they did that.
Well, it made very good sense, and I didn't back it on Kickstarter. I have a Netflix. Or is it on Netflix or Prime? Wherever it is, I've watched it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Sucks to be an early adopter in the current climate, especially in role-playing circles. We can talk about. Maybe we could talk about the 5e Dark Souls release. As well. I know we just recently had an episode out about it, but this is in the sunset of that release, and it has not been pretty. But point is, there's lots and lots of different ways to experience D&D now that almost no other commercial property in role-playing can even consider. Call of Cthulhu comes closest to my mind in terms of cultural penetration. But, that's largely outside of what is marketable and licensable and can be profited from by one company. So,
all you can do as a smaller group is give a better quality product, because these big products often quality is not necessarily the focus. Let's put it that way, because I've seen a lot of very substandard stuff that's passed off as on the official one because it's the official one that can get away with being a bit substandard. How good is DnD Beyond as a tool?
Dave, have you used it?
D&D Beyond, yeah.
Give your thoughts.
Not as a GM, but as a player several times. It's got nice dice rolling built in. Apparently there are map packs for it. I haven't seen them myself. The combinations I've seen have been Roll20 for maps and D&D Beyond for character sheets and rolling.
Yeah, that's how it currently works. Last couple of years, I've engaged with it fairly heavily. I've run a campaign using it. I was piggybacking off another player who had a D&D Master account, so I was able to access all the core rules. I never really thought of them as books at that point. I was running 5th Ed for the first time, having never cracked open a DMG, and it didn't appear to be necessary. All the players had their rules to hand. We were able to look up whatever we needed. And I was and because I've got a background in design and graphics, I was putting my own stuff together in Roll20 to use there. However, since then, I have seen the full integration. I'm currently playing in a pre-published campaign from WotC, using all the official assets that have been put up for sale on the Roll20 system, and we've got the full D&D Beyond integration, so the API ties into Roll20, feeds through seamlessly. It's a very comfortable environment to live inside. The map comes out, your characters are placed on it, all the lighting, all the line of sight stuff has already been done for the GM. For the encounters as they are published in the book, all the monsters are already placed on the right kind of layers so that they can be brought in, and the stage is set for you to run the game. You're not even having to take the toys out of the box. All the handouts there, all the artwork is there. all the character portraits are there, and yeah, it all just works. And that that, bear in mind, is having to sort of cross a gap to the Roll20 side of things. And Roll20 is interesting, but it's definitely designed by engineers. Like, it is not a friendly, intuitive system. It's quite hard to navigate. It's quite hard to wrap your head around how to do certain things that should feel intuitive. There's not a lot of just drag and drop and it works in it. It could bear an awful lot of front-end user experience sort of work done on it. So if there's a company who can produce the kind of easy-to-use stuff we've seen at the D&D Beyond character sheet size stuff, if that expertise is coming to the virtual tabletop, fully integrated for D&D, then it's probably going to be the best D&D you can play online. And there's a ways to go yet, because we haven't even talked about how you might 3D rig camera capture so that your NPCs could be animated in camera while you talk as the GM. That's tech that's
VTubers
exactly.
as
why not? I mean, it's, again, digital assets. It's not. I'm not going to say it's easy to rig a 3D or 2D image of a face to respond to capture from a webcam, but I've seen it done and it is possible.
Some annoying orange level stuff in our future.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's always going to live and die on the quality of the GM that you have behind it all. But the tools are maturing rapidly, and it's all becoming more and more integrated. So
I'd agree in general, but if you're assuming that this is the master plan, is to integrate D&D Beyond with either a new VTT or solidify the link to Roll20 and make it more official, they've only got 2 years, because presumably what they want to do is to have this ready to go for Anniversary Edition. I don't call it 6th Ed yet, but we do know that, you know, in 2024 they're going to have the new edition, and we would hope that they have something ready to go, because otherwise they get a 4th Ed situation where they launch with the tools. Oh, they'll be coming in 6 months. Oh wait, something bad happened and it all falls over. Do you think is 2 years enough development time to expand their dreams for D&D Beyond to their... Well, you know, we presume they have this master plan, but do they have enough time to implement it?
Well, I mean,
it depends depends what the engineer they have on stock is. Like, do D&D Beyond have an engineer or a programming team that have been working on the idea of building a VTT? Because there's been VTTs that are basically, like, Foundry was kickstarted from a small, passionate developer and team, and they put together something very good in just over 2 years. It's been working on longer than that, but yeah, like, so if you go and you get a guy with a bit of experience, like, you go, whatever you decide, hey, money-wise, we're going to spend, you go and throw $500,000 at that guy, say, hey, come work for us for $500,000 and get our VTT working. You can do it that way. You can throw money at a problem and, you know, get a solution. May even work, you know, or they may already have it in development. Like, I would say, with the start of the pandemic, like, anyone who was doing digital tools must have been saying, well, you got to get a way to play online in addition to being good support online. So they could be a year or two into development of their own VTT privately. You know, absolutely. It's not like that. It's not... They're complex. They're not that complex. They're not game complex, you know? So it's doable. It's very doable if you've got someone. Like, they're not game complex. They're complex, but they're not game complex.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, you're not...
You're moving largely static images around tokens and sort of and other bits and pieces and opening a few windows. It's not to belittle the effort that goes into it. I think lighting engines, things like that, are the kind of new hotness at the moment. And they like,
you don't need like a team of 20 graphic designers putting together 3D models for you.
No.
You know, it's not that. It's complex. It's not AAA game title complex. Like it is a lot of work to that. There's nothing, but it's not farcical to go, oh my god, how could this company possibly it's possible. Put the resources in, it's very possible.
Yeah. I mean, like, just throwing money at a problem doesn't guarantee the best possible solution, but as you said, you'll get something out of it.
I have two still thoughts extant about where this is going. The first one is, has this announcement started getting game stores worried? Like, we could presume that in the eyes of the Hasbro investors, this isn't meant to be a replacement for their physical goods section. They want to expand, not, replace. But would store owners be getting worried that is sort of the dive down the slippery slope of moving to a digital only marketplace? Because, like, how significant a part of D&D offerings going forward is this likely to be? Because, as we say, it is the route to expansion, and expansion in our modern capitalist society can kind of have a habit of replacing what came before, or at least that's the fear of people, and fear can be as motivating as the truth. Could we see a sort of backlash from game stores who are worried that they need to keep pressure on WotC? And they may suggest that they'll support other games that are more physical or tied to physical stuff.
Well, that is currently. I mean, that's what they've been doing for the last 10 years. If you walk into the friendly local game store in this part of the world, the vast majority of the space is taken up by board games, which have that benefit of you need to put them in a box and sell them to someone. There's too many bits and pieces in here to do it any other way. And then the table space itself is given over to card games, whatever's the new hotness, plus Magic, plus whatever the diehards are playing. And that's reflected on the shelves as well. After that, the guys in the back will be taking up the 8x4 tables for wargaming. Again, physical. You need to sell the models, you need to sell the paints, the kits, everything else. They probably have their army lists on an iPad. I doubt game books are... And then you turn around and there'll be a shelf stuck somewhere in the corner that has whatever small number of role-playing books your friendly local game store is currently stocking. And about 80% of those are going to be WotC titles, D&D. I
was actually in our Gamers World, the local Dublin shop, yesterday for the first time in 2 years, and they had 3 short shelf blocks with RPG content in it. One of them was taken up half filled with D&D. The other 2 were other RPG things. Mostly it was Pathfinder, and then it was like lots of different independent RPGs, some 2D20 stuff, a bunch of Wolf Up stuff.
And they're going to be
so there was actually a half
disorganized
decent selection
grab
there.
bag, really, of maybe the top 3 or 4 games.
Yeah,
I don't think game stores have relied on book sales in the RPG space for a very long time.
But there
was 3 shelf units there, so that's better than it has been.
Yeah,
that's better than it has been.
There is, however, the element of one of 5th Ed's big secret weapons for a long time has been Adventures League, and the sort of feedback loop between giving game stores, 5th Ed stuff, but also using game stores as a platform to organize Adventures League and sort of use that as their gateway into the hobby. It's just like give a large number of people a low commitment, low intensity way to get into the hobby and try it out, but it requires physical spaces to do it.
Yeah, but what's even lower intensity and lower commitment? Not having to leave my house. And I can do all of that online. I think WotC have about as much interest in the friendly local game store now as no, I can't think of anything here. It's not a relationship that's anything other than sort of performative or perfunctory at this stage. Releasing the books as books almost seems like a kind of nod to where they came from rather than what they actually are as a company.
Like, so you suspect that they might be trying to finagle some form of online version of Ventures League out of all of this as an end goal? Maybe
It's
not.
got to be right. It's running already
first...
somewhere, right? I mean, what's stopping anybody?
Not in an official capacity.
Sure, but
There's no.
there's no official.
I mean-
that's the name. Yeah, if there's a virtual tabletop, the flagpole, the tent mark flagpole product for it will be the Monday night magic of D&D, which is Adventures League. It'll be about getting people on their desktops, their laptops, on their phones for the Friday night game, and maybe it's a pickup, maybe there is a local GM, maybe someone's posted something on a Facebook page. You have your D&D Beyond account. You can sign into the game through whoever's Discord, and they'll have the official artwork, etc. Your character sheet will be unlocked for whoever that, or it's your registered Adventures League character sheet. You'll have it ready alongside your 5 or 6 other characters that you're running in 5 or 6 other games, because you're in the ecosystem now, baby. If you're going to start a new game, you're probably starting a D&D game. I've sounded breathlessly anticipatory and celebratory about all of this, but this is the point I'm trying to make here. We have now got a point in history where we have the D&D gaming industry, and outside of that, everything else. And at the moment, this is the bright and gleaming city on the hill, and then the squalid shanties that don't get anything, and that's not ideal. But it's very hard to see it going any other way right now.
Well, yeah, but hold on a second. You're suggesting a situation where WotC, who have built themselves up as largely a physical product, like the big innovation of Fifth Ed has been turning D&D from a nerd thing into a sort of lifestyle brand, and their presence in physical stores has been a big part of their growth. And selling the T-shirt, selling the mugs has been one of the big innovations the last few years. Are we suggesting, therefore, that it is inevitable for them to retreat completely from that space and focus entirely online just because that would be easier to control?
No, but I'm asking you the question, why on earth do you think it's got anything to do with game stores? Like, if I buy a D&D book, I get it from an online vendor who will give me 20% off, and it's worldwide shipping free. Like, why on earth would I buy it from the local friendly game store who is going to charge me full whack and probably a premium for the island tax? That doesn't compute. And if
Well,
go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, like even in terms of bookshops in general, there's been fair bit of consolidation over the years, as the likes of Amazon are just more competitive on choice and price in a lot of ways. Less useful in other ways, like such as the browsing experience. But
that's all right. I've any number of YouTubers who are happy to sit there and leaf through the book I'm thinking about buying, so that I can get a 1080p look at it before I buy it. I don't need to go to a game store. I sure as hell don't need to pay game store prices. I can still support, and I take your point, Scarr. There probably still is a huge part of the D&D part of WotC's value that relies on book sales, but I don't see how it has anything to do with game stores.
What's the last time you've seen a YouTube reviewer give a D&D book a bad review?
Yeah, those are. Here's the thing: finding actual reviews of role-playing products is tough and it usually lags way behind the release, because it's the kind of product you have to sit down and spend an awful lot of time with. Yeah. When you buy any sort of role-playing product, what you essentially have is a box of parts, and it's up to you to put it together with your players. And whether you get to do that the week it comes out, or whether it's going to take you a month to prep the campaign and then another 2 months to play any sort of meaningful amount of it that you can give an honest opinion, by then the algorithm has passed you by. No one's really that interested. So the best we get at the moment is leaf throughs and sort of first impressions. Very hard to find an in-depth review of any sort of meaningful RPG release. But hey, we don't really need that, right? It's as long as we have a Kickstarter running, as long as we got some hype going. Oh, I'd absolutely love it.
I'd like it as a consumer, but I don't think it exists anymore. There's engines behind this. There's good reasons for it not to exist for certain companies.
And Let's Plays are not going to do it either because they're more focused on performance, as we've seen with Critical Role.
Absolutely.
They don't give you a really good impression of how the game might actually play if you're just treating it as a robust rule system, which, let's face it, not a lot of role-playing games really are.
I'm still a little. I still feel that maybe this is an out-of-date thing because, as I say, the pandemic has killed a lot of things. But I got the impression I got, and maybe this was fallacious. It was before the pandemic. Adventures League was their primary in-gate. The primary way they were getting people into the hobby. And I understand that the pandemic has probably killed that for a long time, but I would feel it weird for them to abandon that entirely and focus entirely on new digital stuff. I suspect that while on the long term, but I'm thinking in the term of like 5 years, like 2030 would be when I would expect the glorious techno dystopian future that Savage is suggesting. I would suspect that that's going to be a few years because they're still going to have a massive element of we still want Adventures League, we still want physical book sales, we still want to have a presence so that we could do our lifestyle brand, and then slowly the controlling advantages of having the hypothetical digital everything one-stop shop DnD Beyond master platform that would slowly cause them to phase out their physical stuff and move it all to Amazon warehouses and
Amazon warehouse is one of the most physical places in the world. Logistics is king, and moving something from somewhere to somewhere else is the backbone of almost all of the real internet economy. So I think you're swinging at I think you're fighting a bit of a phantom there. D&D is not getting out of physical books, possibly ever. However, the importance that physical books will play for most people's engagement with D&D going forward is going to be minimized because it is more convenient to hit update on the app than it is to go out and find the book and read all of it and figure out which bits of it are relevant to you.
I will say this, right? I don't think they're going to get rid of Adventures League or stop supporting FLGSs for one reason. They sell a huge amount of Magic product in physical based on Friday Night Magic. They were doing so much business with Friday Night Magic that they announced the cancellation of the Pro Tour, which was the idea of Magic as a lifestyle or Magic as a thing that you could do in a period of your life where you spent traveling and playing Magic. And they got rid of that. Now, recently they brought it back. Do you know why they brought it back?
Because sales of Magic so you could play and dream about entering the Pro Tour had fallen.
No, it was because the sales were not significantly down because of that. The reason was that Flesh and Blood, a competitor game, started running a Pro Tour. And D&D looked at that and said, yeah, but I've spoken to you about it a couple of times. The one that comes off, like, people keep assuming it's an investment scam. People keep saying it's an investment scam. And mostly, admittedly, co-opted Magic people. But, whatever.
Plenty of money.
Tons of money. But basically, they've started running the Pro Tour again. And they said they're bringing the Pro Tour back because another company was getting into some space because of that. They get a huge amount of retail off Friday Night Magic. They will not get rid of game stores because they don't want to leave a crack in the door open that another company might capitalize on that space.
Yeah, that was...
They want to keep the space. If they will spend the minimum they have to spend, but they will spend it to maintain dominance in a space, because every time they've given up space, someone else has gotten in there for a while. And they've often made a business out of it. Like Paizo, they weakened their hold in 4th Ed, and that left the door open a crack, and Paizo got in and became... Paizo weren't beating them, but Paizo became competitive with them at their lowest ebb, which they do not want.
Yeah, like, that's sort of where I was trying to get to, is this idea. It's just like, I don't see them withdrawing from the physical space entirely, because that would require giving other people an opportunity to step in and create some physical game, something that really appeals to game stores and gets people in the door. So I don't see... I certainly see implementation of more digital stuff and services, and more... And eventually, where more people bring their iPads, sure, but it's not going to be an abandonment, because that would invite Paizo or Chaosium or White Wolf or probably some new investor-driven game to take up that space, and I don't see that happening. So I don't foresee the death of physical D&D stuff anytime soon.
Well, and if you're big enough print runs, publishing can be profitable. It's when you're small print runs, publishing isn't. But when you've really big print runs, publishing's profitable because writing's cheap and art is fairly cheap.
Oh yeah, the physical books will remain in the warehouses ready to ship. There's just a certain generation of gamer who isn't going to give up on filling the shelf. But the people that WotC are courting, like they're actively hardcore courting, are digital natives who are going to feel very comfortable playing D&D without possibly ever having bought a book. And it may well be that they'll be delighted to head down to the local game store for Friday Night Magic with iPad in hand and participate in kind of the gaming experience in the store, surrounded by their cohort. But they'll have done all their spending online. They're probably better off. You're probably better off selling these people coffees if you're running a game store. It's the margin on coffee is pretty good. The WotC aren't giving up any ground in terms, and don't take my comments on how D&D and local game stores are going to relate in the future to be the same as how WotC and local game stores relate in the future, purely because of, as was mentioned, Magic the Gathering is still the biggest part of that pie in terms of product shipped week to week. It's one thing to have a new book every month, but you're walking in and dropping, like, what's the average Magic the Gathering player spend every time they reach for the foil? You're not going to buy one pack, you're buying 5. What do they go for now?
€20?
25 probably for 5 packs, basically.
Yeah, that's as good as a book.
Maybe four or 5, yeah.
WotC overall, I'm sure, are delighted that game stores are giving so much table space and prominent display space to their best-selling product. It isn't D&D. But D&D has, I think, if we go back to why we're talking about this, with the acquisition of D&D Beyond, has now the potential to follow its cultural and sort of meme and audience tendrils, to follow the places where D&D as a brand and a concept have gone. Now have the potential to follow that with saleable products that can reach the same kind of people who want to watch Critical Role every week, who want to sit down and watch the Vox Machina TV show, who want to, are kind of thrilled to see the tie-ins for Stranger Things and God, what they do, Rick and Morty. They like Let's Plays, they like gaming online, and now they can spend their money inside the tent and have a very seamless, very well curated experience. I used to think Owen was being a little bit alarmist when he talked about how people would sort of come into the hobby and only ever experience D&D, and that was it. I think that's probably more likely now, going forward. And it feels like a bit of a shame that someone could call themselves a role player, and really the only thing they've ever played is D&D. The only virtual tabletop they've ever seen is one curated by WotC. The only books or access to virtual products they've ever spent money or bought from is from D&D Beyond. Like there's a much bigger. How I guess the danger here is that all of this has come without any sort of third ed SRD kind of announcement to go with it. Of course, why would it? This doesn't feel like it's going to open the doors for other companies. This feels like the first few bricks in a very high garden wall.
Yeah, I mean, like if they can just keep everything in house, why wouldn't they? Like, to keep people not even looking at stuff outside of the 5e ecosystem.
Some people will be happy with it, especially like if they manage to integrate. If there was some kind of graduation system to, say, move your DM's Guild products onto the new thing, or monetize your homebrew some way. If they manage to get that to work, that would be the DM's Guild community would probably be happy with that. But
does anyone know what the DM's Guild cut is for publishing, effectively? Like, what's their Apple or Steam cut? Steam's like 30%. WotC have put themselves now. If they open a virtual tabletop, they could potentially put themselves in a position where they could be that kind of storefront. That all they have to do is sit back, take 30%, and laugh all the way to the bank. And it's at that point that, as Owen said, you would probably see a dip in the quality of official product. If you consider the quality of the official product as it stands today to be some sort of bar to aim for in the first place, your mileage may vary there.
I do want to go loop back to somewhere we were starting, was that like this acquisition, as much as it portends all the stuff that our doomsaying has been predicting for the last 40 minutes, it isn't WotC themselves that have bought D&D, it's Hasbro. And that makes me curious as to, are they bringing in the expertise of this company specifically for more D&D stuff? Or should we actually be thinking of it as more of an extension of their other digital things? Stuff like, as we said, Magic the Gathering has Gatherer, its sort of online database, but it is very limited, and it could be so much more. And you could have a sort of system to sort of replace the likes of Channel Fireball and the other Magic systems. But also, I'm thinking about stuff like what was the name of that Kickstarter-like system that they released Hero Quest on? What was that called again?
Hasbro Pulse.
Yes. What if the actual plan is something more like expanding all of those elements and sort of having a Hasbro-wide digital expansion to basically turn all these individual digital assets of Hasbro into more of a corporation-wide, integrated platform of, basically placing Hasbro as the masters of digital gaming. Digital tabletop gaming, or what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a good question. I suspect Hasbro don't have another property or collection of properties with the same sort of informational depth that Magic the Gathering and D&D have, which kind of makes the acquisition of D&D Beyond with the purpose of building the Trivial Pursuit or the Monopoly reference library. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, go to your local toy store. Like, how many play the game of how many different versions of Monopoly are on the shelves, which I find perverse. EastEnders Monopoly, Simpsons Monopoly, Manchester United Monopoly, and they all take up the same amount of space, and they are pushing something else out. And this is very different from the specialist game store that will have lots of different publishers, lots of different games. But the idea that you've just got different flavors of the same very bad board game monopolizing that much shelf space in a real place that has to, every foot has to be turned into profit. The rent is due. Sure, it fills a lot of space. It takes up a lot of the kind of the mind space in terms of name a popular board game in the public imagination. But once you've played one Monopoly, you've played all Monopolies. and there isn't a lot of depth there. I don't think you'd need to ever run to a database to figure out, what's the difference between this or that monopoly. Whereas D&D and Magic the Gathering have this depth, this intellectual this informational depth that requires something like D&D Beyond to really be able to leverage. I just can't think of anything else in Hasbro's catalogue that would benefit from it. I think this is, if WotC's worth $1 billion and they spent 150 million, I think it's purely to do with the things that sit inside WotC's envelope. And if the corporate structure is that D&D Beyond sits alongside WotC, fine, whatever. They are different skill sets after all. But it's very clear that the two things fit together perfectly. And that's why they were bought.
It is something that thinks this is like one of the things you have to read as a context is about 5 days before the D&D Beyond announcement was a similar was a shareholder. Some of the shareholders at Hasbro very specifically called out that there was apparently a huge amount of their profits last year, or their potential value, had been put into, or WotC had grown to be a major part of Hasbro's stock value or something.
Yeah, and the activist
they were
investors want to see it sold off or hived off to a separate company.
Yeah, and it just seems interesting that these two announcements are so close together, because it implies that there's this minority shareholder, but a pretty significant one.
2.5%. The activist shareholders are a feature of the American corporate landscape, and they are always agitating for some move, because any move is a fluctuation in the market, and that fluctuation creates a gap that can be profited from, basically, in the terms of this buying and selling of shares. Activist shareholders are looking to make a buck, and they don't actually really, for the most part, seem to give a damn about what happens to the company after that moment of flux has happened. They criticized Hasbro as being run kind of as a family company, still a family sort of based company. The same sorts of people are sitting in the same sorts of chairs, and your second name better be this, that, or the other to rise in the company. And that irritates activist investors, especially because that's a fairly closed shop. It's very hard to make fluctuations. The reality is that Hasbro are run like that because that's what works for Hasbro. They're enormously successful, and they've made good bets down the years. They're not about, they resisted the move, almost shrugged it off. I think they knew that these 2.5% shareholders, while they get a say and they get a vote, they're not capable of actually rocking the boat hard enough for Hasbro to give a damn.
These people are agitating for their own financial interest. It's I getting hot and bothered about them seems irrelevant unless they actually have some actual power.
Yeah, they wanted to float 5 new board members onto the Hasbro board. Yeah. No, you don't control enough votes to do anything other than make a noise. I think they agreed to interview 2 potentials, and those were fairly summarily dismissed. Nothing at the top has really changed. And then, of course, this announcement comes, and I haven't looked at Hasbro's share price on the back of this announcement, but it's been, if you wanted excitement, here it is, and it looks like we didn't have to hive off companies. No, in fact, we're doing the opposite. We're just going to acquire more companies because they fill parts of the map for us.
So, folks, we live in a capitalist hellhole, and
why do you not like this? That's been the driving sort of thesis of all of these questions for the last hour. So finally, lay it out for us, Scarr. Why do you not like this? Why does this not look good, or why does this not taste good to you? It's your opinion. We value it. We want to hear it.
I'm actually not really that heavily opinionated on the announcement itself. It's the reaction you guys are giving to it is sort of saying, well, inevitably this means a total consolidation to the market by WotC and the forcing of all gaming out of thing. It's just like I don't see it like way. Like I see it as it's an interesting development. I see it, but I guess I'm as an eternal optimist. I don't see the automatic success of the corporate world and the idea that they will get everything they want doesn't really. I feel like at some point there's going to be a misstep, and the great giant conglomerate is going to leave some room somewhere in the market for others to profit off their expense. And it may not be what we would call the glorious indie revolution and all their OSR inspired story gaming nonsense. But I don't see that this announcement implies a lot of things. It implies more digitalization, more emphasis on digital sales, more control over the market, but I don't see it as an end of gaming or anything. It's part of a trend, certainly, and an awful lot of what has been said here will come to pass, but I don't think it's the side of the apocalypse as more as, a point on the trend line. Like, there's still going to be outliers, and I don't think it's going to doom the RPG industry. I think if images of WotC turning their 99% thing into a 99.9%
market share.
Yeah. I don't think it's an attempt to that, sure, but I don't think it's going to be quite as easy or as inevitable as it might set. Like maybe I'm just too nice, too hopeful, but I suspect that while a lot of this is going to happen, I don't think it's going to destroy things. I think at the end of the day, there's a large chunk of the gaming world, even the newcomers, for whom the physical process of going to a game store or sitting around a table with physical books, I think those people are always going to be a strong part of the gaming industry. And even if WotC abandons them or makes things annoying for them, they're going to pick up some other games. Maybe some licensed Fifth Ed knockoff that we're going to talk about in a future episode. But I don't foresee like the total capture of the market. Like, yes, almost inevitably, WotC are going to move to a more digital system because it is more controllable and more monetizable, but it's not necessarily going to be more profitable, and it's not necessarily going to replace other things. I think we're going to be okay, even with this big announcement.
Oh no, we'll still be fine. But because we've created our play groups already. And it's just that if you break in now, right, who's going to break into these other RPGs? That's the question. And do you even consider, like, are people coming and say, I want to play a role-playing game, or people coming and saying, I want to play D&D? And they're going to start by coming and saying, I want to play D&D. And it's just going to be harder to convert them, but that's always been the case. I don't know how much bigger D&D is than everybody else. It could be that everybody else is a rounding error to D&D, that 99.9% of all players of RPGs are D&D, and everybody else is the 0.01% or something like that. We don't know because you don't have industry figures. I don't know how bad it is. I think D&D might be 5 times the size of everybody else. Or 5 times, the hardcore D&D audience is 5 times the size of everybody else. Put together, basically. But I don't know for sure. I'm looking at the big Kickstarters, and the big D&D 5th Ed Kickstarters are doing about 10k. 10k basically backers. So that tells you there's 10k, 10,000 hardcore D&D players, and you could run a cottage industry with 3 or 4 big developers off that. And then everybody else, if they're doing well, is between 2,000 and 4,000. So that's one way to look at it. One way to try and assess the size of the hardcore hobby. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to kill the rest of the hobby. I think it will be a bit depressing if you're not a big fan of D&D. You will watch an awful lot of everybody plays D&D, you know. But that's like anyone in any hobby that has a one giant goes through that experience of there being only one competitor for ages. And then occasionally another competitor arises if you get a magic confluence of stuff, you know? And that's all we can hope for, really.
Are we wishing a fourth ed upon the world again? Is I guess what we're asking.
Fourth ed was a good game. It just had a bunch of errors about it. They didn't playtest it enough.
And
but
the promised digital tools didn't pan out.
Yeah,
like basically. Fourth ed feels like the
Yeah.
thing that should have been married to that sort of virtual experience and wasn't. Dave, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. A few. Well, on a positive note, physical stores, I don't see them going away entirely anytime soon. But also there's a lot of indie games that never see print. They're being released on DriveThruRPG, itch.io, various other platforms like Amazon, and they're either digital or print on demand. And I think that there's a bit of energy in those scenes. As for corporate dominance, I can't help but think of how Amazon became the 800-pound gorilla of the book world. As in, if you are getting books, it and the companies it's bought, like Book Depository, are the places you end up going quite often. I'm an oddball in that I prefer bookstores, and I'm aware of that. But yeah, I can't rule out Hasbro becoming utterly dominant in the RPG sphere in terms of sales, but a small percent of a large market is still a lot of potential players for people who don't want to play 5e all the time. I mean, I play 5e here, but I like playing other things. I don't like the idea of one game system to rule them all. But yeah, it's going to be trickier for people coming into the hobby, as Owen says, to find people who want to play anything but 5e at the rate things are going. Or to have people interested in coming in and playing anything other than 5e. So yeah, I mean, it might mean a bit more work in, I suppose, getting word out about your favorite game system, or convincing people to give something else a try. But, I mean, again, that's always been the way to a certain degree.
Right. So, I won't say anything more about local game stores. I don't really know that they figure into this equation, given that D&D Beyond is a very definitely digital first operation. I think there is potential here for the space to grow. If D&D Beyond's acquisition by Hasbro/WotC means that we're moving towards an official D&D virtual tabletop experience, then that is going to send up a couple of flares for everybody else in the space. And if you've got your act together and you can present something that looks like a coherent gaming ecosystem, and you can, instead of hiring on another editor, hire a programmer, start looking for some investment, start looking for some outside players who see Hasbro's share price go from X to Y over the next couple of years, assuming the D&D Beyond acquisition pans out and is wildly successful. Then that's going to mean that other games companies, other tabletop companies, potentially could make themselves very attractive to investors to do something similar. Because once WotC/D&D Beyond demonstrate that this is doable and this increases your value to your parent company, and this is wildly successful and popular with your player base, or even potentially grows your player base, then it's going to be there's always second movers in these markets.
The presence of an Apple store implies an Android store is coming.
Exactly. Yes, and they'll compete on things like what kind of cut, features, properties. They'll speciate out into, oh, well, we're the guys who deal with horror RPGs, and we use mechanics that are too edgy for D&D. Only adults should apply. Or, we do we speciate into, we do translations of popular Japanese RPGs that if you are a big manga anime fan, you just can't find this sort of stuff anywhere else, but we're going to make sure the dubs and subs version of these properties is available to you. And we have our own tabletop that has chibi emoticons and lots of stuff from those popular properties to slap all over your virtual tabletop. It's potentially huge for the entire industry if it attracts it. So the 800-pound gorilla potentially goes to the 1-ton gorilla. And then other people start to think, well, if I can find a small monkey and pump it full of investment steroids, maybe I can get a piece of that as well. And that's going to be a few years down the line. And there's also the milestone of Anniversary Edition / 6th Ed, whatever the hell they're going to call it, to contend with as well. Is there a master plan? Maybe. I'm sure they've got things they'd like to do. The whole RPG virtual tabletop industry could probably benefit from another 2 years of pandemic, but it's looking unlikely at this point. So maybe it'll be something else.
We'll have to. We're going to have a couple of years of pandemic. We're just going to ignore it.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot that the trouble is that if that doesn't happen, then it is practically ghettoization for everybody else, especially if Hasbro / WotC slam the door on the virtual tabletop stuff and lock out people like Roll20, who I have to imagine have a lot of their eggs in the D&D basket at this point. And if they can't service that need because the API turns off one day, then they're going to find themselves in a very cold, dark place. And it's not clear that whatever the rest of the industry amounts to will be enough to keep them going, especially with all the other competitors who are offering genuinely interesting stuff like Foundry. The trouble for D&D Beyond now is if they want to go to the virtual tabletop space, which we've had no announcement of, they're going to have to at least match and probably come way over the bar that has been set very high by some very dedicated people. Like what I've seen of Foundry and Roll20 and a few of the others, like these are good products. These are good places to do different things. And that's before we even get to the still slightly pie in the sky 3D building tabletop stuff, for the crafting GM who really wants to put all the toys on the table. Me, essentially. And they're still, a lot of those are still sort of beta Steam kind of workshop efforts at the moment. But potentially this is what D&D Beyond is going to have to match. And that obviously is a huge hurdle in programming. It does become a bit more like computer game levels of programming at that point. Yeah. So let's put a cap on this one anyways. We've said our piece. Folks, find us on Discord. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I've shown my true colours as a heartless corporate shill, or maybe just the sworn enemy of the friendly local game store, or perhaps a doe-eyed digital native who doesn't appreciate the importance of dice and hardback books, or whatever else, whatever those toes we've stepped on today. We'd be delighted to see you on the Discord. Check the show notes for a link to pick up the debate and perhaps even make some other blue sky predictions about what's coming next. Who's going to close us out?
The inevitable digitalization of everything.
Well, we wouldn't have a podcast without it. Very hard to get these things out on audiograms. All right, I've been SavageMick.
I've been Warlord Scarr.
I'm Dave.
And I've been Owen.
And I guess this party and all hope and freedom is over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.